People often believe that changing your life takes years of hard work, big breakthroughs, or some kind of magic. But let me tell you the truth, sometimes a single week is enough to start turning everything around. I'm not talking about miracles. I'm talking about simple practical habits, tiny actions that, when done with intention, can transform the way you think, feel, and live. Today, I want to share with you the 5 habits that changed my life in just 1 week. These are not theories. They are real, tested, and powerful. If you truly apply them even for 7 days, you will see a new version of yourself, stronger, calmer, and more focused than ever before. Start small but be consistent. When people talk about changing their lives, they often imagine some grand moment of transformation, a sudden spark of brilliance, a big win, or an overnight success that turns everything around. But let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Real change doesn't come like a thunderstorm. It comes like the first drop of rain. Small, almost invisible at first, but if it keeps falling, the whole ground changes. That is the power of starting small but staying consistent. When I began this journey of transformation, I had so many big dreams, but I realized that my biggest enemy was not lack of talent or opportunity. It was the weight of my own expectations. I wanted to do everything at once. I wanted to wake up early, read a book a week, work out every day, meditate, learn new skills, all while handling my regular responsibilities. And like many people, I failed within the first few days. Not because the goals were impossible, but because I tried to run before I even learned to walk. That's when it hit me. If I wanted to create real change, I had to start small, so small that failure had no space to grow. So I told myself, today, just pick one thing, not 10 things, not 5, just 1. That day, I chose to read 5 pages of a book before bed. Only 5 pages, not a whole chapter, not the entire book in one sitting. And do you know what happened? I finished those 5 pages easily. It felt simple, almost too simple. But here's the magic. When I woke up the next day, my mind whispered, hey, that wasn't so hard. Maybe we can do 5 more tonight. And we did. Day after day, the habit grew, not because I forced myself, but because I allowed it to fit naturally into my life. And that's the secret. Consistency is built on tiny victories. The human brain loves winning. When you set a small goal and achieve it, you feel a sense of accomplishment. That feeling pushes you to keep going. But when you set a massive goal and fail, you feel defeated, and that defeat kills your momentum. Starting small gives you the gift of progress without the burden of pressure. Another thing I noticed was how my self-discipline began to grow in unexpected ways. That one small habit, reading 5 pages, soon created a ripple effect. I started to think, if I can read 5 pages every night, maybe I can do 10 push-ups every morning, and I did. If I can stay consistent with reading and exercising, maybe I can cut down my screen time by 30 minutes. And I did that too. Slowly my life began to shift, not because of one massive leap, but because of many small steps taken consistently. And this is what I want you to understand. Small does not mean insignificant. Small habits are the foundation of big achievements. The tallest buildings in the world start with small bricks. The greatest athletes begin with small daily practices. The most successful people you admire didn't get there because they made one huge move. They got there because they kept showing up, doing the small things no one else was willing to do, day after day, year after year. Most people fail because they wait for the perfect moment, the big opportunity, or the right motivation. But consistency doesn't need motivation, it creates motivation. When you see yourself making progress every single day, no matter how small, you begin to believe in yourself again. You start trusting that change is possible. That belief is what keeps you going when the initial excitement fades, because let's be honest, it will fade. That's why starting small is not just about ease. It's about building a system that survives even on the hard days. Feed your mind, not your fears. When I decided to change my life, one of the first things I realized was that my mind had been on a diet of fear for far too long. Fear of failure, fear of what people would say, fear of not being enough. And like many of us, I didn't even notice it at first because fear has a subtle way of entering our lives. It comes through the things we watch, the people we listen to, the conversations we have, even the thoughts we entertain late at night when no one is around. Slowly, it begins shaping the way we see the world and ourselves. For years, I consumed whatever was around me: negative news, gossip, endless social media scrolling, mindless entertainment. None of these things were helping me grow, but they were taking up my time, my energy, and most importantly, my mental space. You see, the mind is like soil. Whatever you plant in it grows. If you plant weeds, you get weeds. If you plant seeds of knowledge, hope, and inspiration, you get growth. But most of us are allowing weeds of fear and doubt to grow freely because we keep feeding our minds with things that weaken us instead of strengthening us. So I made a decision. For 1 week, I would change my mental diet. Just like you can't expect to eat junk food every day and stay healthy, you can't feed your mind with negativity and expect a positive, powerful life. So I stopped watching the kind of content that only brought stress or fear. I stopped following people whose lives revolved around complaining or criticizing everything. Instead, I began filling my mind with ideas, stories, and voices that built me up instead of breaking me down. That week, I read books written by people who had turned failure into success. I listened to podcasts where leaders shared their journeys, including the mistakes they made and how they overcame them. I spent time watching speeches that left me feeling inspired, not drained. And something incredible happened. My mindset started to shift. Suddenly, the future didn't look so scary anymore. It started to look like a challenge I could handle, a mountain I could climb, one step at a time. And here's the thing, when you change what you feed your mind, you change the way you think. When you change the way you think, you change the way you feel. And when you change the way you feel, you change the way you act. It all begins in the mind. Most people don't realize how much their mental environment affects their confidence, energy, and creativity. If all you hear every day are voices telling you the world is hopeless, the economy is collapsing, or that you're not good enough, your brain starts to believe it. But if you surround yourself with words of encouragement, success stories, and lessons from people who have achieved what you dream about, your brain begins to believe that success is possible for you too. I remember one night during that week when I came across a story of someone who had failed dozens of times before finally building a business empire. As I read about their struggles, I felt a strange sense of hope. It wasn't just about success, it was about resilience, about refusing to quit when things got hard. And I realized this was exactly what my mind needed. Not more fear, not more doubt, but examples of courage, persistence, and possibility. The more I fed my mind with positive, empowering content, the more my energy changed. I began to wake up with ideas instead of excuses. I started seeing opportunities where before I only saw problems. It felt like someone had cleaned the windows of my mind, and suddenly the world looked clearer, brighter, full of potential instead of danger. Value time like gold. One of the biggest lessons that changed my life was realizing how much time I had wasted without even noticing. We all have the same 24 hours in a day, yet some people use it to build empires, write books, start movements, or transform their health, while others watch the days slip by without much change. The difference is not luck. It is not intelligence. It is not even money. It is how they value their time. Time is the most precious resource we have, yet we treat it as if it will always be there. You can lose money and make it back. You can lose possessions and replace them. But the hour you lost yesterday, it is gone forever. I used to hear people say this, but I never truly understood it until I started looking closely at my own days. I asked myself, where does my time really go? And the answer was eye-opening. Hours spent scrolling through social media, watching videos I didn't even care about, saying yes to every invitation even when I was tired, staying up late for no reason, sleeping in because I had no energy. My time was slipping through my fingers like water, and I was doing nothing to stop it. That week, I made a decision. If I want to change my life, I have to start treating time like gold. Gold is valuable. People protect it, they store it carefully, they trade it wisely. What if I guarded my time the same way? What if I refused to waste it on things that didn't matter? People who drained my energy, or habits that left me feeling empty. The first thing I did was track my day hour by hour. Not to control every minute, but to become aware of how much time was actually wasted. Awareness is powerful because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. I realized I was losing nearly 3 to 4 hours daily to things that brought me no growth, no joy, and no progress. That's almost an entire day every week gone. Do you know what you can do with an extra day every week? Learn a skill, build a business, write a book, improve your health, spend time with family. Yet most of us throw away that time like it is nothing. So I started setting boundaries. If something didn't align with my goals or values, I said no. It wasn't easy at first because people are used to you being available all the time. But I had to remind myself, every time I say yes to something unimportant, I am saying no to something that truly matters, my dreams, my growth, my peace of mind. The second thing I did was prioritize learning and creating over consuming. Instead of spending an hour on social media, I used that hour to read, to write, to plan my future. Instead of watching random shows, I watched interviews with people I admired, people who had built meaningful lives. The difference this made in just 1 week was incredible. My mind felt clearer, my energy was higher, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my day instead of my day controlling me. And here's something I want you to think about. Time is not just about productivity, it is about life itself. When you waste time, you are not just delaying success, you are delaying happiness, growth, experiences, and the person you could become. Every hour is a chance to move closer to the life you want, but only if you treat it like the treasure it truly is. When I started paying attention to the people and the environment around me, I realized something shocking. Most of my thoughts, my emotions, even my energy levels were not entirely my own. They were shaped by what I saw, what I heard, and who I spent my time with. We like to believe we are completely in control of our minds, but the truth is we are influenced every single day by the people we talk to, the conversations we hear, the energy in the rooms we enter. And here is the hard reality: if you spend enough time with negativity, it becomes your normal. I remember a time when my days were filled with people who loved to complain. They complained about work, about life, about opportunities they never got, about how the world was against them. And even though I didn't want to, I found myself complaining too, seeing problems everywhere, feeling like nothing was ever enough. Why? Because energy is contagious. Attitudes are contagious. Spend enough time around fear and anger, and you start feeling fear and anger. Spend enough time around hope and courage, and you begin to feel hope and courage. So when I decided to change my life, I knew I had to change my environment first. I had to find voices, people, and spaces that lifted me up instead of pulling me down. At first, it wasn't easy. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones filled with the most negativity, not because they are bad people, but because they've been hurt, disappointed, or taught to expect little from life. But if you want to rise higher, you can't carry everyone's doubts on your shoulders. You have to make a conscious choice about what energy you allow into your mind and heart. That week, I started replacing complaints with conversations about ideas, dreams, and possibilities. I listened to people who had overcome challenges, not those who gave up when things got hard. I followed creators, leaders, and thinkers who shared wisdom, not drama. Even if I couldn't always be around positive people in person, I filled my day with their voices through books, interviews, and speeches. It felt like I was feeding my soul with fresh air after years of breathing in smoke. Slowly, my thinking began to change. When you surround yourself with positivity, you start believing in solutions instead of obsessing over problems. You start to see opportunities where before you only saw dead ends. I noticed how much lighter I felt when I spent even an hour listening to someone who believed in growth and possibility, instead of sitting with someone who only talked about how unfair life was. That 1 hour could lift my entire day. And here is the amazing part: positivity doesn't just change how you feel. It changes what you do. When you feel inspired, you take action. When you believe things can get better, you start looking for ways to make them better. Your energy rises, your confidence grows, and suddenly the goals that once felt impossible start to feel within reach. That is the power of surrounding yourself with the right energy. But there's another side to this. Sometimes you have to distance yourself from negativity, even if it means losing certain friendships or habits that have been part of your life for years. That can be hard because comfort zones are built from familiarity, even when familiarity is toxic. Yet growth never comes from staying in the same circles of complaint and fear. It comes from stepping into spaces where hope lives, where dreams are respected, where effort is celebrated instead of mocked. One of the most powerful changes I made that week was so simple, yet it shifted the entire way I looked at my life. I started reflecting at the end of every single day. Not once a month, not when things went wrong, but every day. For years, I had been living on autopilot, waking up, rushing through tasks, going to bed tired, and repeating it all again without stopping to ask myself if I was even moving in the right direction. It felt like running on a treadmill, lots of motion, but no progress. Reflection changed that. The first night I tried it, I sat down with just a notebook and asked myself one question. What did I do well today? And what can I do better tomorrow? At first, it felt strange. We're so used to criticizing ourselves or pretending everything is fine that we rarely take a balanced look at our own actions. But when I started writing, I realized this wasn't about judgment. It was about awareness. I wanted to see my day clearly, the wins, the mistakes, the moments I could be proud of, and the places where I needed to grow. And here's what happened the moment I wrote things down. Patterns began to appear. I could see how I kept getting distracted at the same time every afternoon. I noticed that my mood was always better on the days when I exercised in the morning. I realized that some conversations gave me energy while others drained me completely. Without reflection, these things stayed hidden in the background. With reflection, they became lessons I could actually use. It amazed me how small insights created big changes. For example, one night I wrote, I wasted an hour scrolling through my phone when I could have read something useful. The next day, I set a simple goal, read for 20 minutes before picking up my phone. That small adjustment turned into a new habit within a week. Another night I wrote, I didn't speak up in that meeting because I doubted myself. The next day, I prepared one idea in advance so I could share it with confidence. Little by little, reflection turned mistakes into stepping stones instead of roadblocks. And this is what makes daily reflection so powerful. It prevents you from living the same day over and over again. Most people repeat their mistakes because they never stop to analyze them. They think life will magically improve one day, but the truth is, life doesn't improve by accident. It improves when you pause, learn, and adjust deliberately. Reflection also gave me something I didn't expect: gratitude. When I look back at my day, I realized there were moments worth celebrating: finishing a task on time, having a meaningful conversation, resisting the urge to procrastinate, staying calm when things went wrong. We often focus so much on what's missing that we forget to appreciate what's already working. Reflection reminded me that progress, no matter how small, is still progress. But here's the key: reflection without adjustment changes nothing. So after reviewing my day, I made small promises to myself for tomorrow. Not huge resolutions that would overwhelm me, just simple, realistic actions I could actually keep. If I wasted time, I planned 1 hour of focused work for the next day. If I lost my temper, I planned to pause and breathe before reacting next time. If I didn't prioritize my health, I planned a quick workout or a better breakfast. These adjustments were like course corrections on a journey, tiny shifts that kept me moving toward the life I wanted instead of drifting aimlessly. And so, after 1 week of living with these 5 habits, starting small but staying consistent, feeding my mind instead of my fears, valuing my time like gold, surrounding myself with positivity, and reflecting and adjusting every single day, I realized something that changed everything for me. Life doesn't transform in one giant leap. It transforms in small, deliberate steps that compound over time. So many people wait for the perfect moment, the big breakthrough, or the right opportunity before they start changing their lives. But the truth is, the moment you begin is the moment things start shifting. Even if it's small, even if it feels insignificant, because small victories create momentum, and momentum creates transformation. I want you to imagine something for a second. What would happen if you gave yourself just 1 week to try these habits? Not forever. Just 1 week. 1 week of consistent small actions. 1 week of protecting your mind from negativity. 1 week of guarding your time like it truly matters. 1 week of surrounding yourself with energy that lifts you up. 1 week of learning from your own day instead of running through it blindly. Can you imagine the kind of person you would become if you kept doing that week after week, month after month? The life you dream of isn't waiting for luck or chance. It's waiting for you to take control of your days, your thoughts, your habits, and your choices. Every day you wake up is a fresh opportunity to build the life you want, and these 5 habits are the tools that can help you do it. Because in the end, the difference between the person you are today and the person you want to become isn't a secret formula or a magical opportunity. It is the small things you choose to do consistently, even when no one is watching, even when it feels slow, even when it feels hard. That is how change begins. That is how a single week can set you on the path to a whole new life.